Mobility is a large factor when making tanks, and I have done multiple videos about tank mobility in the past. But in the recent few days, there has been a lot of changes made to how mobility is handled in Sprocket. So today, I figured I would do an updated video on what I've found so far to be working on version 0.108, and how this 25-ton tank can reach top speeds of 70 kilometers an hour off-road and 80 kilometers an hour on road. So, to get into it first, of course, we're going to need a decent length to width ratio. You want to definitely be between 3 to 1 and 5 to 1 in terms of length to width of the hull. And you don't want to be too wide with the tracks. So what I got right now in terms of length to width is pretty much alright. Basically, if you want to make a new tank and it's going to be serious build, just look up something like an Abrams and you can have a rough idea of like or a Leopard 2, maybe get those are all calculated to be really good length to width ratios. Kind of stick to those because having either a too wide build or a too long build comparison to the tracks and everything else, it's going to give problems. If it's too long, aka too narrow, you are going to have problems steering. And if it's going to be too wide, you're going to have problems with stability at high speeds with the tank turning on its own. That said, of course, when making a tank, the second most important thing is total mass. There's no need for your tank to have 200 millimeters of armor on like your hull, or more than 300, because even with an angle like this, it's already just 50 millimeters of armor. It's already 195 millimeters of protection, and guns aren't going to punch through much more than that. And yeah, you just want to keep that in mind. Angle your armor before making it heavy. And be smart about it. You can make your roof, rear, and bottom armor very thin. So, to get actually into mobility, you are actually want to have to look at the basic tab of your engine real quick to see what it says right here. It can be like underpowered, underwhelming, or maybe just fast or very fast. Of course, you want it to be at least fast for your tank to, be fast. And you want to find a highest amount of cylinders, and then kind of get a displacement that is not too high, not too low. In my case, I went with one of the Kippertree's 3100's maximum RPMs, and that's actually what I'm looking at the most, because if you reduce this value, you're going to get a higher RPM value, which is theoretically a higher top speed, but you need to balance it out so your engine can actually deliver enough power to reach that top speed in the first place. So, yeah, kind of find a place that is balanced. If you have an, if let's say like, just put your transmission and put like a whole bunch of gears in, and you can do that through my website that I've hosted to calculate gears. Like I have this whole list of gears. Just make your transmission very large, and just put in a lot of those gears. And just go see how high you can get, like to which gear you can get. If you feel like you could potentially go to a higher gear, you can increase your engine displacement and then reduce the target RPM, because then you're going to be able to accelerate to higher gears. But of course, the gears themselves will have lower speeds, so you kind of want to toy around with that. Transmissions, as mentioned, you should be using that website, because that website will calculate perfect gear ratios for how you use it. There's an info card on the right side on that website to tell you exactly which value affects what part of the tank's behavior. So basically, having that set up, there's one thing to note actually. You do not want to have a gear 1 that's higher than 5, no matter what you are doing. You really don't want that. Like, even when I go like this, I'm gonna be driving 20 kilometers an hour by the time I go to gear 2. Like, you cannot, if you want to have like more steering, you can get have a really small gear 1, and then go to like a really small, a much, like a really large gear 1 and much smaller gear 2. But it's really not needed, because your tank, if you want to turn, you're either gonna be, turning on the spot, and then you're gonna have one rear, backwards, one forwards, and you're gonna have a very fast steering. And otherwise, you're gonna be moving at least gear 2, and you will have fine steering as well. That really doesn't matter. So, like, don't go for a large gear one because you absolutely don't need it with how the system currently works. The engine has tons of power to pull you even with these low gear, very good low gear ratios on the initial gearing. It's perfectly fine. But now comes actually the biggest thing that's impacting speed right now, which is the size of the sprocket, size of the idler, and the size and amount of road wheels, as well as the setup of your suspension. So suspension actually is much simpler than it looks. What you want to do is minimize the difference between specific weight and torque, these two values. You have torque above specific weight, but you want to minimize the difference basically. That way you have the most amount of travel for your suspension, meaning that the suspension can move up and down the most, giving you like the least likelihood of your wheels catching air. Because any wheel that's in the air is a wheel that is not accelerating. So you can see right here, I'm accelerating still very quickly. But as soon as I had that little jump, I lost an immense amount of speed. And we'll see here as well. You just lose a lot of speed when you are in the air. So having a small difference here is going to actually maximize the amount of travel you have. By increasing this, you're going to reduce the amount of movement that your suspension is going to have. Similarly, damper is also going to affect the travel on your suspension here. And you don't want to have it too high, and you do not want it too low. And having that set up is just really the most important part. Not like don't go too high, don't go too low. You kind of want to adjust it a little bit. If you see your wheels catching air a lot and being overall too stiff, then lower the damper. Increase the damper if you are just moving too much and it's rocking all over the place. And generally you want to be around between 10 and 30,000. And that is like really important to have that set up. But another thing is going to be actually the road wheels and the sprocket wheel as well as the idler wheel. So if idler, you don't want it to be small. If you have it very small, it's going to create a lot of physical resistance, preventing it from like it will actually give a lot of resistance to the track and it will slow you down. Having it like a normal size, that's what you want. You don't need it to be extremely big or whatever, but you don't want it to be extremely small either. Then similarly, sprocket wheel. Not too large, not too little. If it's too small, you will get a lot of acceleration, but no top speed. If it's too large, you'll get a lot of potential top speed, but you'll never be able to hit that because your tank can simply not accelerate to that point. So that's another place where you want to toy around. All of these values depend on each other and actually require a lot of testing. There's not a uniform method on how to do something like this. However, what is a uniform method, actually, as far as I found, is for road wheels, you want to have interleaved with the maximum overlap, minimum spacing on per axle, minimum amount of wheels per axle, and the maximum amount of wheel width. Because apparently, as far as I understand it, is that the more wide your wheels are, the more power they can deliver. But having more wheels gives you a slight reduction in power. So this would be better than this. Because here we have more wheels, which means more friction, less total power. So yeah, make your wheels wide. But the reason why we actually want interleaved is because we always want to be able to provide power no matter what the position of the wheels are. So on like kind of these rougher terrains like this, you get more speed out of an interleaved transmission than a non-interleaved transmission overall, because an interleaved transmission is less likely to catch air. And overall, yeah, this will give you a very solid build to work with. Track width is actually much less important now. You don't want it to be, minimum thickness anymore because you want to have to live at least wide wheels. Same time, you don't want to have them to be too wide because then you're gonna have steering that's gonna be not ideal. But this gives you builds that can just climb steep slopes with no problem, and pretty much traverse any terrain at 30 to 40 kilometers an hour. Even like this rough terrain here, no problem whatsoever. But as soon as you kind of hit the flats here, still off-road, but flat terrain overall, your speed is just going to skyrocket very, very quickly, as you can see on the top left of my screen. Already hitting 70 kilometers an hour, and we're kind of topping out here. But we wouldn't be if we were on road, because then we can actually accelerate up to like 80 kilometers an hour with this build. And yeah, overall, I'm pretty happy with how this suspension setup's turned out to be. Of course, your weight of your build matters a lot. Of course, having a heavier build would directly lead to a slower tank, because no matter what you do, you cannot get past the 16-cylinder and 5-liter engine, because that's just simply the max size. One other thing to note is that if you want to get a little bit more, you can also increase the percentage of your efficiency of your driver, which actually affects your gear changing speed, which can give you a tiny little bit more acceleration, but it's not going to be affecting the tank too much overall. You can see right here, the tank is still going to go like 55 kilometers an hour when it's crossing the trench, pretty much. And that's kind of the speed I was aiming for. And yeah, this is pretty much it. There's going to be some reasons why I actually didn't extend out these sponsons on the top here. So I got the rest of the build, and of course I didn't touch the turret at all, so don't even look at the turret because, you know, it's not finished. But those are going to be like stories for another time pretty much. And yeah, that's it. I hope you guys can do something with this big heap of information. Again, it's a lot of testing still. A lot of the math is not yet set in stone, so the only thing we can rely on right now is our transmissions to be perfectly accurate. But like everything else is pretty much still just toying around with the values to see what happens and results in the best result, basically. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys learned something, and I'll catch you guys all in the next one.